Hello, everybody. I'm James Barnum, and I'm here with EatsPerform.com. I am joined by my co-host, the lovely and talented and still tattooed and very swole, April Blackford.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. Uh, we're going to be answering your questions today. I see that we have 8 attendees, and they're all responsive, so if you guys can hit us up with some questions, I'll give my spiel. Hello, Charisma. Anything. Hello, everybody. I'm James Barnum, and I'm here with EatsPerform.com. I am joined by Mike. Okay, little technical glitch there. My apologies. All right. So, anyways, we're going to be answering your questions. Nutrition, training. It can be very specific. Like, don't be afraid to ask what you should be setting up for your macronutrient ratios. Don't be afraid to ask what you should be doing for your control days, when you should be eating. It can be as specific as when you might want to eat a sweet potato or drink a protein shake, or it can be as general as asking a question about what the best carbohydrate source before training might be. So go ahead and ask anything you have. Don't be afraid. We'll get as deep into things as we need to. And with that said, I'm going to open a dialogue with April and ask her how her week's gone, because I haven't talked to her for like a week. How's things going?
My week has been good. My husband had his annual claims conference this past weekend, so I had to wear my strapless short dress and show off my muscles a little bit to all the women. And needless to say, by the end of the night, I had 10-15 women that were wanting some nutritional advice and, training information and stuff like that. So it was a win. They all wanted to know all about Eat to Perform.
Good. And I'm sure that you told everybody.
Yes, that they needed to eat and do some work. I did have one lady that told me that, she wanted the results, but she didn't want to do any work. So I told her that it just wasn't going to work for
her. Yeah, I'm sure we're all familiar with that at this point.
Yeah,
Can't really have.
Exactly. Well, you have your meet coming up in a couple weeks, right?
Yeah, I'm 20 days out now, so it's 2 weeks and 5 days. And I just actually got, if you can give me a moment, I'll grab it. I'm excited about it. I want to show everybody. I'm on a team, not for this meet, but in general, headed by world record holder Dan Green, Team Boss Barbell Club, and I'm going to be wearing a singlet to represent. And this is it.
Sweet. That's awesome.
It's really pretty snazzy. But I'm honored to be able to even say that, because as far as lifting goes, I'm still relatively new. I've only been doing powerlifting for a couple of years, and it's kind of like a fire under my ass to make sure that within the next couple of years I get stronger. So it's an investment on their part and an investment on my part. I'm very excited to be able to get on the platform and represent Boss Barbell Club. They're out in Mountain View, California, in Florida, and that same day they're holding a meet at their gym. So I can't be there, but I'll be at a Raw Unity meet qualifier in Tampa, and it's going to be a very legit meet. I'm excited about it, and I just hit a squat PR.
Of what?
I apologize. I just went out there. I'm experiencing all kinds of technical difficulties today. All right, so
what was your PR?
355.
Sweet.
With wraps, but it was really easy. I'm gonna hit 396 at the meet. No way around it. It's basically not an option at this point. But enough about me. We have a couple questions, although one's just a greeting. Isabel asked, well, first she says hi. Hello, Isabel. She says, I've been with Eats Perform for 2 months now, and I've been getting fantastic strength gains and not putting on fat until about 2 weeks ago. I'm feeling weak and soft, and I'm definitely gaining fat. Should I be changing my macros? Currently, she's at 55 grams of fat, 110 grams of protein, 255 grams of carbs. She CrossFits 5 times a week, and 3 of those days are mostly strength focused. I typically defer to April for our very first question, although I will give my input.
I'm curious to know what Isabel's her height is and her age.
Yeah, I am too. Height, age, weight. Those are all.
Yeah, I think her weight is 110.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah, if she's eating 55 grams of fat, I assume she's 110 pounds.
I'm going to pull out my my calculator. But yeah, Isabel, if you can give us some information regarding your weight and everything. But
typically for me, I'd have to run her numbers for 5 days a week, though. I know typically for me, whenever I'm training high volume, if my carb levels are a little bit low, I will usually tend to bloat and look very soft once I increase my carbs a little bit. And it could just be that she needs, you know, like a higher carb refeed, and she may tighten back up. But if she was doing fine, you know, for 2 months and, you know, was seeing great progress, and then all of a sudden she stalled out and started looking kind of bloated, eating the same macros, then in my opinion, that's a sign that she may need to increase her carbs a little bit.
Yeah, and I think I added up your calories, and that if that's 55 grams of fat, 110 grams of protein, 110 grams of protein plus 255 grams of carbohydrate, multiplied by 4, which is the caloric value of protein and carbohydrate at least going into your body. That's 1,130 calories, and then that should be another 490 something calories. I'll add 495. You're going to be in the ballpark of about 1,625 calories, and for even at your weight, your training volume is most likely overwhelming you. So whether the increase comes from fat, protein, or carbohydrate, you're most likely looking at just needing to up your macros. So short answer, yeah, you probably need to change your macros up a little bit just to add in some more energy overall. But where that comes from is going to depend on, like April said, and I'll agree with this. When I don't eat enough carbohydrates, I can get enough protein in, I can get enough fat in, but if I don't eat enough carbs, not only do my workouts suck, not only do I feel weak, but I start to look softer. I'm not necessarily a vascular man to begin with because I'm maintaining a relatively higher body fat percentage as far as athletic standards are concerned because I don't need to be very agile. I'm a power lifter. But I'll notice that I just don't look as full. And it might happen after 2 or 3 days of lower carbs. It might happen after 1 day, but I definitely notice it.
I ran her numbers just based off of if she's 110 pounds, I put her average height as around 5'1", 5'2". Not sure of her age, but I put average of 25. If that's the case, then she should be hitting at least or close to 300 grams of carbs. But her TDEE would be closer to, with very active, would be closer to 21, almost 2150. And even if you bump down to moderately active, which I wouldn't say that she is, that's still 1925. So
yeah. So I think we both agree then maybe just adding around 50 grams of carbs and seeing what happens.
I would probably start off with 25 grams of carbs on your training days for a week or two and see how you feel and see how you look, and then, you know, maybe increasing another 25. I usually like to do a more conservative level and increase by, you know, 100, 150 calories rather than making a larger jump.
Yeah, I can agree with you on that, but I got to eat like 3,500 calories, so I'm typically more like, oh yeah, just go ahead and add an extra 400 calories to the diet.
Yeah, but you're making those larger jumps.
Yeah, and that's something you have to consider. Anyone else watching, I'm going to make sure that this is pertinent before I go off on a little tangent here. Yeah, anybody, any of the guys especially, if you're, I'm only 165, 170 pounds. When you start modifying your diet, when you're like, all right, what do I do? My workouts are kind of sucking, or I'm not losing fat, or I'm not putting on muscle. You're not experiencing the results you want. women oftentimes have lower energy expenditures just because they have, on average, lower body weight. Um,
Less
they can
muscle
be
mass.
less muscle mass, as that's the big one.
Hmm.
Under those circumstances, they might want to make smaller jumps, but uh, Paul would agree with me on this. This is something we just talked about the other day. You want to make larger jumps. When I add food to my diet, I do it in 300 to 500 calorie increments. So that might be 50 to 100 grams of carbohydrates. It just depends. But Isabel, I hope that that answers your question. You're really just looking at needing more calories. Like April said, around 2,000, 2,200, 2,300 at the top, but that does need to be a gradual increase. And we'll get back to you, Mike, if you have any more questions. But I'm going to move on to a question from Charisma. She says she put on 3 kilograms, but at the same time, she's increased weights on deadlift, back squat. If she should be worried, or is it because of the increase in weights lifted? So you've gained weight as you gain strength. I don't personally think that that's a bad sign at all. In fact, gaining strength as you gain weight is a clear sign that you are putting on a little bit of muscle mass. It would depend, however, and you would, to know that, you have to either check in the mirror, take circumference measurements of body parts that are typically leaner, for instance, your arms, legs, calves especially. You can measure everything, but you can get a body fat assessment done and have a much better chance of guessing what's going on. But my opinion would be that if you've gone up 3 kilograms and you're getting stronger, that you're doing it right. As long as you're not looking in the mirror and thinking, man, I'm putting on some unwanted body fat and it's happening a little bit too quickly and you feel out of control. April, what do you think?
I agree. I totally agree. Usually, when you're gaining strength and the weight goes up, then that's a good indicator that you may be adding some lean body mass. I would definitely, look in the mirror, see how your clothes are fitting. If they're just a little bit tighter, it's probably just a combination of inflammation, glycogen, that type of thing. If they're getting noticeably tighter, 6.5 pounds is, that's kind of at the range where you kind of need to take a step back and look. And, if you're not looking better, and you're noticeably looking fatter, then, we may need to make some adjustments.
Yeah, and it also depends on how long you've gained that weight in, or the period of time.
And
If
I
that,
think she's active in the forum, and
yes, she is. In
she's fairly.
fact, I'm sorry to interrupt you, April, but she said on the forums, sorry, April, if this is repetitive. I guess my question is more, the more we eat, should we be moving more weight?
Absolutely, I would think.
I would agree.
Yeah.
In fact, uh, this has kind of been kept under wraps for the most part, but April, myself, Paul, and Dr. Spencer Nadolski are writing a book together on flexible dieting that we're going to make available as soon as we're happy with what we've got. And that's essentially what we're trying to drive home very, very, very early on, is that energy expenditure and energy input are 100% related. When you eat food, you're essentially giving your body what it needs to move more weight. So it's causative rather than correlative. I would expect, for instance, someone going from eating 2,000 calories over the course of maybe a year even, and moving that up to 3,500 calories or something like that, if that were within their capabilities, that they're going to see some dramatic strength increases, and they're going to see dramatic increases in lean mass, and they're going to feel like a freaking tornado. They're going to feel very, very, very strong. I've known that to be true, and I think it's anecdotal, but it is supported by basic thermodynamic laws. You put more energy into a closed system, and it's going to adapt. It's going to get stronger if you're lifting weights, and if you're sitting around on your butt, then you're going to get fatter, and your body's going to adapt in ways that make it better at sitting around.
And you should always, like what you were saying, you should always be trying to get your calories up, a little bit higher if possible. If you find your sweet spot and it's at 2,200 calories, and you stay there for 3 or 4 months, try increasing to 2,300 calories, and eventually, because I've seen a lot of people, I've seen women that are smaller than me who do less work than me who have gotten their calories up to over 3,000 calories and maintain their weight. You know,
Mhm.
who the heck wouldn't want to eat that much food? I know I would. So,
Well, if you like eating, then absolutely. And th- to me, you really don't get much of a say in it though. Like you can't really trick nature. If your body is going to maintain at 3,000 calories and you're doing a moderate volume, and someone else's body is going to maintain or lose weight, excuse me, at 2,500 calories, you can influence that to a certain degree, but it's gonna come down to genetic factors and other lifestyle factors. You know, you can train your butt off in the gym, but if you have a desk job, then you're going to burn far fewer calories than a person that's on their feet all day.
exactly.
But you always want to be increasing your energy intake because that's going to give you the fuel and the materials, as long as it's not just carbohydrate, as long as there's an increase in protein to a certain level. You don't need to pack away hundreds of grams of protein if you weigh 110 pounds, 150 pounds. A gram of protein per pound of body weight is perfectly fine, but as you add energy, you're going to see, as long as you're doing the things that you need to make sure that it's going to a good place, it's going to be good pretty much always. We do get it into our heads sometimes that when the scale goes up, when we look a little soft in the mirror, we have a bad workout, we're very quick to jump to conclusions that what we're doing isn't working. But if you look at program design, you look at the way that strict diet is designed, that's intentional. You're trying to drive the organism to adapt, so it has to go through an alarm phase before it can get better. It's going to storm. It's always going to go like that. So that's why I think this is a valuable tool, and having the forums valuable, because anyone that's gone through this is going to tell you, chill out. You want to gain a little bit of weight, as long as it's not crazy and it didn't happen overnight. And you know, I'll
Exactly.
ramble on forever. The coffee's hitting me. Aha.
I
But
had a male client that I had been dealing with a couple months ago, and he swore up and down. He was shorter. I think he was about 5'4", pretty small. You know, why I say small? I would say he probably averaged around 140, 150 pounds. But he was trying to build, and he swore up and down that the last time he bulked, so say, he did that at 2,200 calories. And I was like, there's no way. I said, there's absolutely no way that 2,200 calories are the calories that you need to gain muscle. And he's like, oh, I'm telling you, I gained. I said, no way. He was a construction worker too. So you tell me. But I ended up getting his calories up to, slowly helping him and working his calories up to like 3,300 calories. And he still wasn't gaining, with 3,300 calories, and he just could not believe, that he could eat so much food, which he wanted to eat more food. He was just scared, but he was stuck at the number of,
oh,
2,200 calories, and I was trying to explain to him, that's the calorie level for a female. That's no young male should be eating 2,200 calories, and you're a construction worker and you work out at the gym 4 or 5 days a week. So, like what you said, it's not about
yeah.
getting your mindset in the number and staying there. You got to work from that. You got to work up. So.
Yeah, and it'll constantly change. It'll be different all the time. And I mean, who's to say that he didn't develop positive adaptations being at 2,200 calories? He didn't build muscle. If he had gotten body fat tests done and everything, I'm sure that you would see that he recomposed more so than he added a lot of muscle mass to his frame. And you can certainly get stronger on lower calories. He's probably extremely well conditioned. There are so many explanations for it, but if you're feeding him an extra 800 calories, 1,000 calories, and he's not gaining weight, then that shows you that he was in an energy deficit for a long time, and that he's got a long way to go. I know increasing my calories before Eat to Perform started, and I was 136 pounds. I couldn't get over 145 pounds eating over 3,000 calories every single day. It took me a long time, and now eating what I'm eating I'm still not putting on weight, even though I'm technically in a caloric surplus based upon my calculations. It's all going to come at whatever rate it comes at. But I hope that answers. I'm sure that it does. That may have been a little bit more into it than we needed to go, but I'm going to move on to another question, and hopefully we can help. Mary asks, or rather, she states that she plans on doing an Olympic weightlifting competition and a triathlon. I know the ebook Metabolic Flexibility stresses in order for the muscles to grow. Stresses rest in order for the muscles to grow. I plan on just leaving the weekends as my rest days. Is that sufficient? By next week, I will be training 2 times a week, 4 to 5 times a week. Or is that 2 times a day, 4 to 5 times a week? Yeah. Should I also be changing my macros at that point? Absolutely. As we've been discussing, when you go, and this is an appropriate question to ask, and I have some anecdote to add at the end because I have a client that's actually competing at the USAW Open next weekend, or actually this Friday. So, but yes, you definitely want to change your macros. It's going to have to happen in a gradual fashion because you have to adapt to increased food intake, just like you have to adapt to an increased clean and jerk or snatch. But it depends on where you're at right now, what your macros look like. She says 160, 80, 225 protein, fat, and carbs. Weighs 100 pounds, 5'3", works out 4 to 5 times a day, or 4 to 5 times a week. Two or three days of those are 2-a-day workouts. So that's a lot of work to do, even for Olympic weightlifting, which is not necessarily long training sessions where you're constantly, your heart's pounding. There's not a lot of aerobic work going on, and your caloric expenditure is going to be lower. But the fact of the matter is that moving at such great velocities with heavy weight in comparison to your body mass is going to put a huge amount of stress on your adaptive reserves. So it's not necessarily about energy expenditure. It's about, what is this doing to your body? Your nervous system and skeletal muscular system are going to have to adapt very quickly for you to make the kind of progress that you're going to want if you're going into a competition. So yeah, you're looking at eating more and having those 2 rest days. If you can keep those as rest days and maybe get like a short walk in and keep your calories high, I would suggest under those circumstances that you don't even really take a control day. And before I get too deep into things, I apologize, the coffee will drive me to talk too much. April, please give me your stance on Mary's situation.
I totally agree. I think that she should increase her calories. I would suggest starting out on her double days, increasing her carbohydrates up to 300 grams on her double days, and then keeping them where they're at on the single days, and then slowly working them up on there. I do agree with you. I do not think that she needs to dip too low on her rest days, on her control days. Maybe even keeping carbs around the 150 gram, range on those days. I don't think dipping them too low is gonna benefit her with recovery.
Yeah, I'm gonna calculate some things just for a second. We got 160 times 160 plus 225.
I actually already calculated it.
Oh, thank you. I'm so bad with numbers.
So on her double days, at least, probably all of her training days, but just to start out with, if she kept her protein where it was and her fat, she would increase her carbs up to 300. She should be over right at 2,500 calories, a little bit over 2,500 calories.
And that should be good. If you're specializing in Olympic weightlifting and that's all you're doing, then I think that would be perfect. But if you're doing CrossFit and you're doing any conditioning work, then like we were saying earlier, you're going to be looking at reassessing your calories based upon your performance, body composition, and all of that jazz. So I'd go with April's suggestion and go up to 300 grams of carbs on your doubles, but you're going to want to get back together with us and look things over when you feel as though they need to be changed or you want guidance. So the anecdote that I want to add there is that preparing for the USAW Open, and she's lighter, but she's eating between 2,300 and 1,800 calories every day, and she has to cut weight this week. And this is the only time where I'm suggesting her to actually take control days where she actively just goes and hits her protein and drops her carbohydrates down to like 150 grams, because her training sessions are basically like 3 or 4 lifts after a warm-up. So not a lot of work, lots of rest, and she's not hitting up any conditioning work. So as you get closer to your competition, you're going to need to look at things too. If you hit a point where you need to lose weight to make a weight class that you desire to be in, and you're 4 or 5 pounds over, then your nutrition will have to be modified, as well as other things, you know, like water loading, perhaps taking diuretics, although I'm not particularly fond of that. Even for powerlifting, if I'm going to drop 15 pounds, I would prefer to do it by eating fewer carbohydrates, drinking a lot of water, and keeping the period of the lower weight, because it's such a dramatic drop sometimes, you know, as short as possible. But I hope that answers your question. If you need to follow up, Mary, then absolutely go for it. But I'm going to move on to a question from Steven Stansel. He says he's new to Eat to Perform. He CrossFits 4 or 5 days a week. He used the TDE calculator, and it said to take in 3,250 calories, which is comprised of 227 grams of protein, 304 grams of carbs, and 125 grams of fat. Just wondered if these were the right macros for me. He's 5'11", 225 to 230 pounds. And
How old is he?
let's see if he gave me some more information down there. Stephen, if you would like to ask, or if you would like to answer for us, your age, that'll be like the last missing. He's 30. So you're around the same age as I am, not much older. So I imagine you're still a whippersnapper and still killing it. I think for a starting place, that's pretty good. You got protein around a body weight, or around a gram per pound of body weight. The carbs, that's a good place to start, but you could probably get away with a lot more as you go. It depends on where you're coming from right now. If you're coming from a low-carb or low-calorie background at this point, then you're not necessarily going to want to jump right into even that 3,200 calories or the 300 grams of carbs. You're going to want to start off a little. You're essentially going to want to track what you're eating and work up to it. April, what do you think?
No, I agree. I ran his numbers. He's got himself started out at moderately active, which is what I would do, which is what I would recommend. Usually when someone is borderline on 4 to 5 days and they have, you know, a little bit of fat that they need to lose, I would usually recommend moderately active. So I think his numbers are good for starting out. I do agree with you that if he was coming from a lower carb or lower calorie background, he would need to taper those up over the course of a month or so to get him up to those levels. I usually recommend to a lot of the new members, you know, it's better to dip your toes into the ice cold water than to jump face first in. You jump in face first, then it's going to be a lot more painful than just dipping your toes in and then gradually, you know, working your way into the cold water.
Yeah, it's literally like saying, okay, well, I squat 200 pounds. Today I'm going to put 500 pounds on the bar. You're going to get buried. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration, but, you know.
That's actually a comparison. I like that.
For hyperbole. Or it's like saying, you know, my max was 225 and I'm going to go for a PR today. I've been training and I want to hit a 275-pound back squat. But, you know, you haven't done the things in the middle. You're not sure what's going to happen, and it could be good, it could be kind of crappy, or it could be disastrous. So you always want to approach things with a little bit of caution. And if you can give us some more information on what your goals are, Stephen, where you're coming from in terms of how you've been eating, and all of those things, we can give you a little bit better of an answer to your second question, which was, what are the best foods to eat to hit those numbers? Because under some circumstances, you might want to avoid certain foods. Not necessarily avoid them, but prioritize eating different foods. So give us a little bit more information if you're still there, Stephen. And I'm going to move on to a question from Cassandra Pariso. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. She says, "Hey," or "Hi, I've been on ETP for CrossFit, getting very soft and gaining weight. My clothes are really not fitting lately. I'm fine with the muscle gain, but overall I'm getting bigger. Am I still in the adjustment phase with the added carbs?" I'm going to April on the initial answer to this.
Your internet was breaking up a little bit. How long has she been eating to perform?
She says she's been eating to perform for about a month. She's improved, gaining weight. Clothes are not fitting the same, and she's fine with gaining muscle, but she just feels like she's getting bigger, and she wants a bit of reassurance that she's either in an adjustment phase with the added carbs,
Depending on
taper something down, adjust something.
What her background was prior to Eat to Perform, if it was low carb, lower calorie, I would say she's definitely still in an adjustment phase. You know, a month is really not a long time to get adjusted if you're coming from 100 grams of carbs a day to 225 grams of carbs. You know, I'm curious as to if she jumped into it or if she's gradually worked her way up to it, type thing. A lot of times too, you know, if you track your food like with MyFitnessPal, go back and take a look at, you know, your fiber levels, your sodium levels. You know, a lot of different things kind of factor in regards to the puffiness and the bloating, and you know, and so forth. Just how you look in general. You know, my weight typically can fluctuate anywhere between 2 to 6 pounds daily. You know, and that's, you know, that could be a bowel movement. That could be my water intake wasn't as high yesterday as it should have been, or, you know, it's just a lot of different, you know, factors and variances that could cause the feeling. So I would definitely say that she's still in an adjustment period. What do you think, James?
Absolutely. Like I was saying a little bit earlier, whenever you change anything, whether it's a dramatic change or a small change, you're going to hit a point where you're going to be in a state of shock, and you're going to question what's going on. And you have to understand that whatever you're doing, because that her primary goals are to lose fat and getting stronger and everything, improving in the gym is a secondary goal. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but initially, and this is going to be another focus of the book that we're writing, I'll use the example of trying to drain a bathtub that's already empty. If you are coming from a background of being energy restricted, being in a chronic energy deficit, what you're going through right now, these adaptations, the feelings that you're going through psychologically even, are all associated with recovering from that. Not like you're recovering from like an injury or anything, but your body's essentially learning how to deal with the carbs, learning how to deal with the extra energy availability. And I would guarantee you that if you're improving performance, that it's going in the direction you want it to go in, but you're going to have to embrace it. So that's going to be what I'll say for now. As far as losing fat goes, though, I'm sure that if after a month now, that there's some kind of modification that you can make. So to give you kind of a better explanation of what I mean, I would need to know what your macros are at least. So Cassandra, if you can give April and I a little bit of information about what you're eating right now and where you came from, your background before you started eating to perform, then we'd be able to give you a more specific answer. And Stephen, if you're still listening, I would like some more information on you. So if you guys can get us that, just submit it as a question. Don't worry, it's kind of like a chat at this point, and we'll give you guys a little bit more advice. And Isabel, if I can actually see if you guys are still there. She's still here, but not. Oh, she's back. Awesome. All right, Isabel. She says she's back. Sorry, lost internet connection and missed your answer to my question. If you don't want to repeat it, then just say so, and I'll ask April in the forum. I'll get right back to you, Isabel, okay? Just give me one moment. If you can ask again, because I've lost frame of reference at this point. I'll be honest.
Isabel? I
Yeah.
remember Isabel's. I always write all the questions down.
Thank God.
Yes, I write all the questions down just so we can go back and reference when they have follow-up questions. We have recommended to Isabella, when she gave her recommendation, or when she gave her stats of her, she was 110 pounds, she was eating 110 grams of protein, 55 grams of fat, 255 grams of carbs, and she said that she was doing great for 2 months, and then she started getting puffy, and we actually went into detail, basically stating that we thought that she needed to increase her carbohydrates. And to start out, you eventually probably need to work your way up to 300 grams, but I would start out with 275 on your workout days, and stay there for a couple weeks or so, and then, you know, see if that helps, and then increase again if you need to.
Yeah. My apologies, Isabel, but yeah, you basically need to increase your energy intake because you're doing more work and you're more athletic than those calories are going to allow you to progress on. And eventually, staying there could cause some problems. You could start to regress in terms of performance. Could start to lose muscle mass as your body adapts to the lower calories. But that's pretty much it. I hope that yeah, if your internet goes out again and you missed it that time, we'll repeat ourselves as long as you get it in the end.
We'll also post a recording of the webinar too in the forum. I'm sure the first response was a lot more detailed than the second response.
Oh yeah, yeah. And for everybody, this is being recorded right now. It will be in the forum. So if you want to review a question, or if you want to share it with someone on the forum, if they ask a question and you're trying to help out, you can always defer to recordings. Isabel says, okay, that makes sense. So the fat gain is due to a lack of calories, which is causing my body to store more as fat. Not necessarily, but you could feel like you look soft and you're getting weaker just because your muscles aren't getting the energy that they need, or are mostly, if they're not the carbohydrate that they need. Carbs are hydrophilic and they draw water in with them. So if you're not storing as much glycogen as you can, your muscles are going to look flat, and you're probably not gaining fat necessarily, although if there is ever any weight gain, you can bet that there will be a small amount of fat. But you're probably not putting on a lot of fat, just essentially hydration and energy balance needing to go up. You might find as you increase your calories that you just start to look better and feel better. I know that April's talked about when she goes on it's just not as good.
Yeah, I get bloated, watery. I literally look like I'm almost 10 pounds heavier, you know, when I try to reduce carbs down or even reduce my calories in general.
Mm-hmm.
My body is trying to fight for the food.
Yeah.
It wants it. It wants to keep it.
And I've experienced the same thing. If I cut my calories down, it's just I don't feel good. I don't look good. I like to eat a lot of carbs, and I like to train my butt off. And
you know, we've had this discussion before, and we get a lot of members who have been eating to perform for, you know, a month or 2 months, and they basically state that they're not seeing any progress. They haven't lost any fat, you know, this and that. But I think in the grand scheme of things, they need to look at the, you know, the progress that they have made. They've gotten stronger. They've maintained their weight. They're probably eating 1,000 calories more than they were prior to Eat to Perform, you know, before, because I see a lot of women especially who were eating, and a lot of men too, who were eating, you know, with women it's usually 1,300 calories, you know, a day, and then, you know, they've worked their way up to 2,200 calories, and they've maintained their weight as to what they were at 1,200 calories, you know, and they're making, you know, new PRs at the gym and, you know, throwing all kinds of weight around, and then, you know, they get discouraged because they're like, you know, I haven't lost any fat, I haven't made any progress. That's huge progress, you know, in my opinion. That's massive progress, you know.
I mean, it's hard to look at it like on a macro perspective, to look at it like, well, this is my life, and I mean, sometimes things just don't go how you want them to. Sometimes you don't lose fat, you don't gain the muscle. So you have to, in my opinion, because this is a lifelong thing, you can't just do it for a couple months and then be done with it. And I'm not referring specifically to Eat to Perform, but being healthy, being active, being athletic, it's going to take a long time. If it's going to take you 10 years, it's going to take you 10 years. So you have to look back at your accomplishments and give yourself credit for the things that you're doing, regardless of how small you think they may be, regardless of how irrelevant they might be to some people that are just, you know, like if you want a six-pack, someone that is obsessed with having abs might not look at, oh, well, now I can eat more food, so when I go out to dinner with my friends and family, or if it's someone's birthday or there's a special event or a holiday, you know, I don't have to worry about what I'm eating necessarily, because I'm not going to blow up because my calorie intake is 1,000 calories higher than it was before. You know, you gain freedom. Not only do you gain freedom of strength and movement by eating more and improving your relationship with food, but you gain freedom from having to worry about all those things. And there are people out there that are dominated by that. I'm sure that some of us have gone through that. They're dominated by food, and it's, you eat it, you put it in your mouth, chew it up, and swallow it, and it shouldn't hold any power over you. But that's a huge amount of progress to make. As April was saying, you know, look at everything together, look at everything as a whole, and, you know, work on the things that you want to improve, but always give yourself credit. And to finish off, Isabel's got one more little follow-up here. She says, would it be ideal to eat the increased carbs around your workouts? And absolutely, especially pre-workout if you got time. If you work out early in the morning, you'll want to eat carbs before you go to bed the previous night. But that's ideally the best place to add them, simply because then they'll be available either in general circulation in your bloodstream, be pulled in, turned into energy, or you'll replenish glycogen. I wouldn't worry about it necessarily. I think you could also do to have some post-workout if you want to split up whatever you add. If you add 25 grams in, for instance, though, then I would do it pre-workout. What do you think, April? When would you add carbs in?
Me, honestly, I would probably add some more cereal in my serving at night, but that's just me. But no, I agree. Adding it around your workout is the logical thing to do, depending upon what she's having around her workout and how much she's having, and, you know, how her performance is going and so forth. You know, that's the smartest place to add them.
So you would start off with, say she works out in the morning. You'd start off with adding a bowl of Rice Krispies before bed.
I would actually add
5 carbs.
Yeah, I typically, I guess it's dependent upon, a lot of early morning trainers really go into their workouts fasted. If she's doing that, I would probably have a little bit of extra carbs the night before, to see if that, you know, improves her workouts or whatever. If not, then just have a little bit of extra post-workout.
I would personally, since I'm not a morning person, and Isabel, I'm not sure when you're training, but if you aren't training in the morning, I would give yourself an hour before training, just to start off and have whatever carbohydrates you're going to add in, have them an hour or so before you train to give yourself room to digest. And, you know, you don't want to go into a workout feeling like you're stuffed. It's never good. I've personally been in situations where I ate too close to a workout, put on a belt, put a max squat on my back, and you know, missed the lift because I was regurgitating. So that's essentially what you need to be aware of. It can affect your blood sugar and make you kind of feel either hyper, or you could feel low. But mostly you're just looking for comfort in terms of how long you wait before eating, or before training after eating. So she usually does 20 to 24 grams of protein pre. and post-workout, and about 40 to 50 grams of carbs pre and post-workout, trains late morning after a carb and protein meal, then that's perfect.
Yeah, I agree. I'm curious as to how long her training sessions last.
If you want to give us an answer to that, Isabel, because if they're going longer, you might want to add, like say you work out for 2 hours, you're probably going to want to look into, since you're already having carbs before and after training, you might be able to put those 25 grams in during your workout.
I agree. If her training sessions are lasting an hour or longer, I think that extra 25 grams would go perfectly intra-workout. Because I know once I started adding intra-workout carbs, because I had never, I had always felt like, oh, well, if I eat something before, why do I need intra-workout carbs? But then when I realized how long my training sessions were lasting, kind of middle towards the end, you start getting fatigued and energy levels start going down. You're just tired. You can't lift as much. But once I added intra-workout carbs in, it was like a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, I've experienced the same thing. I split my training sessions up because they're so long. I do my power work, sport-specific movements for powerlifting, or if I were doing Olympic weightlifting, I would do that. And then after that session, which is going to take me about 45 minutes, I'll go and I'll eat something, or at least have a shake in the middle. And then I'll go back into the workout and finish out another 45 minute to an hour session. And sometimes it gets split up into 3 sessions if I'm squatting or deadlifting. And it sounds terrible. It is terrible. It's a lot of work to do. But that can really help you get through, and it's an opportunity to eat when you're not normally eating, or at least get in calories, carbohydrates, protein when you're not normally eating, and that can help you without having to really change much, without having to add another meal. That can help you increase your calories. So she says she alternates between 1 and 2 hour workouts. I think the intra-workout carbs would help a lot. What carb source would you recommend during workouts? And April?
I would recommend anywhere between 15, 20 grams, depending upon, I don't think she needs a lot. Starting at 20 grams of carbs per session if it's, an hour or longer. I think she would be sufficient enough for that. Because ideally, you just sip on it, for the duration of your workout. It's not like you're, normally sometimes whenever I go to pull my heaviest deadlift, I'll go guzzle a bunch of Vitargo, because I think it gives me some kind of mental energy, But other than that, you're generally just sipping on it.
Yeah, and April said the magic word. If you're going to do intra-workout carbs, pretty much the best thing that you can get, it's worth it, you don't need to use huge amounts of it, is Vitargo. It's fast, it doesn't taste terrible, and literally you just sip at it, or you find a place where you're going to take a rest. If you've got a lot of, you got a lot of stuff going on, or if you're lifting really heavy, and you got 4 or 5 minutes to sit there and take a quick drink and chat with your training partners and friends, then however you do it, Vitargo is pretty much your best bet. So I'm not sure if we still sell it in the store. What's going on with that?
No, the store's down. Yeah, it's been down for a while.
You can get Vitargo. You can get Vitargo on Amazon. You can get it in various sizes. So if you want to try it out, obviously you can get a smaller size.
I found a 4-pound unflavored tub on Vitacost for $36.
On Vitacost?
On Vitacost's website for $36, which is...
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
because I have...
yeah, it's regularly like $60-some, but whenever I went on after I ordered it, it's sold out now. But you can sign on the list to get on.
Well, I have to get me some because aside from intra-workout, it's got a ton of other uses. If you go through a period of glycogen depletion, Cassandra says Vitacost is amazing, by the way. I didn't know that. I get all my stuff on Amazon. But if you say your weight is down, say, and everything, and you're going to go into your first training session where you're back ready to kill it, then your glycogen stores might be very low. And something like Vitargo that is pretty much guaranteed to end up as glycogen in your body, that can make a perfect pre-workout on top of maybe a meal beforehand. But under my circumstances, when I'm going to cut weight, and if anyone listening has ever gone through a drastic weight shift because of an increase in training volume or because of a deliberate decrease in calories or deliberate manipulation of water or anything like that, then Vitargo can be useful to make as completely as possible so that you can perform your best. I'm going to try to cut 10 pounds between next week and the week following up to my competition, and a lot of that's going to be glycogen. So I'm going to order me some Vitargo, and as soon as I'm done weighing in, I'm going to have a whole gallon jug of it with some stuff, propylene glycol, which is essentially going to force my blood volume to increase, and I'll get very heavy very quickly. I'll go from 175 pounds to close to 180 pounds before I compete the next day. So Vitargo, it's magic, and I wouldn't use anything else to accomplish such a drastic cut and increase in weight. So I'm sure that's a good answer to the question. I apologize if it went on a little bit too long as well. We're going to go and power through some more stuff. I have to thank you guys, by the way, for all of your questions, for being so responsive. April and I have both done we've done webinars where no one's throwing any questions out, and the dialogue is fairly dry, and there's not a lot to really talk about. You guys have been a great audience, and you asked some great questions so far. We've got about another 10 minutes here. We'll run a little bit later so that we can get to more of these questions, but I'm going to stop rambling and go for it. All right. Control days. Is there a set time to eat carbs on rest days? Since loading days, we take carbs around our workouts, so when is the ideal time to eat or not eat carbs on control days? And that's from Charisma. Honestly, during a control day, if you're working out the next day, the best time to have it is probably in the evening. That's when most of it should come, but I think you should distribute it throughout the day at least a little bit if you feel like you need some energy, because some people are very sensitive to it. Some people need some carbs. Like I always think better, write better, train better, do everything better with a little bit of carbohydrate in my breakfast. So
I'm the exact same way, and Paul and I have discussed this several times where, I have to have at least 20-30 grams of carbs in almost every meal just to feel full, because if not, if I try to have a meal with just protein and fat, literally within 15 minutes, I'm hungry, it doesn't do anything for me. So, I usually save a little bit in most meals, and then I'll save a big portion, for dinner and before bed type thing.
I do the same, and for the same reasons. And I'll just throw this out there: your basal metabolic rate, which is essentially what your body needs to power your organs at rest before adding any kind of other activity, digesting food, exercise, moving around. When you're laying there and your sympathetic nervous system is completely unresponsive and completely you're
coma. You're in a coma.
You're in a coma, essentially. Your brain's going to use 25% of the energy of that. So if your brain is burning through 25% of, say, your basal metabolic rate, 1,700 calories, then you're looking at, just for your brain to function, a considerable amount of carbohydrates that can be, they can come from protein. They can be synthesized from other sources, but there's nothing quite like just saying, all right, even though I want to keep my carbs low today and I'm going to have some in my dinner tonight because I'm training tomorrow, there's nothing wrong with going and adding a little bit into each meal. You just want to experiment with the amount and be conservative in the beginning. And hopefully that answers that question. I'm going to move on to Stephen. Stephen got back to us and said he's coming from a mainly paleo diet, which he was not a fan of. He saw good results as far as weight loss was concerned, but his performance was suffering and his body fat was around 21%, and his main goal is to reduce body fat percentage. He wasn't really tracking macros while he was doing paleo, so
if he was doing paleo, he was pretty much standardly low carb. You know,
Yeah,
I would still recommend for him to gradually increase, 300
absolutely.
calories, every week.
What I would do is I would go and start a MyFitnessPal account. If you don't, he's got one. He's got the highest percent is in the fat category, so he's eating a lot of fat. He's eating low carb. Steven, honestly, track your food and see what you're naturally eating. See what you were eating while you were doing paleo, and if you're eating like say 2,000 calories, it's gonna kill you. It's gonna be it won't well you won't die, but it's gonna be very uncomfortable for you to go from 2,000 calories of mostly fat and protein and very few carbs to 3,250 calories. Like you need to make a gradual increase from there. So give yourself some kind of idea of what your calories are like and move towards that. And if you've already made the jump to that, uh, at this point I would say don't stress out about hitting 3,200 calories. Don't stress out about hitting your macros, and just give it time and see how you feel, and you'll eventually get there. And that goes for anyone coming from a low carb kind of a paleo background, because
I think one of the key things about coming from a paleo diet is once you actually adjust to reining in your fats, typically you'll normally see your hunger increase because the higher fats will usually blunt your hunger, keep you fuller, that's why you're not eating as much. But once you adjust those down to a more appropriate level, usually we'll find that your hunger has increased and increasing the carbs would be a lot easier.
yeah, definitely. Because of all of the macronutrients, fat is probably the most satiating. It's got a lot of energy in it. It's really slow to break down. That's the problem. Unless you're talking about medium chain or short chain triglycerides like in coconut oil or MCT oil, you're looking at having up to 10 hours to really get all of the fat into your bloodstream. Not all at once, of course, but for you to even use it as energy, it'll take between 4 and 9 hours. Don't quote me on that because it's dependent upon your activity levels and enzymatic function. It's really complicated, but don't worry about it. April is correct. If you start eating less fat, not only because of the change in energy balance by reducing your fat, but because fat is so slow to digest and it's got hunger blunting properties essentially, you're going to be more hungry and you're probably going to eat more carbs, and carbs and protein are very thermogenic, and they'll essentially promote eating a little bit more. And I hope that answers your question, Stephen. We're going to be done in a little bit here, so I'm going to get to these last couple questions we've got, and I'm going to shut this puppy down. But again, I want to thank everyone for asking questions, for being here, and I probably won't be back next week. I'm not sure though. Paul usually does these with April, but I believe he's taking some time to himself to enjoy some life and do some things, and he's going to be going to the games. When are the games? When are the CrossFit games? They're coming up very soon, and he's going to be there.
I know the Granite Games are in September.
Yeah, but
Are you going to those?
There's a good chance now because I have the funds to do it. So
I started to say you better. I'm supposed to go. We're all supposed to go.
If you're going, then I'm going. I'll put it that way.
Deal.
All right. Alejandro Nader says, sorry about my English. Long question. Don't worry about it. I can barely speak English, and I'm a native English speaker. How long do workout for bodybuilding last? How long should it last? I want to gain muscle more than I already have. April has seen my pics, and this is Alejandro Nader.
Yeah. She's done awesome. She's increased her food. She's building muscles. She looks great. I do bodybuilding style workouts. My workouts typically, of course, there's a lot of chatting going on, kind of like James's workouts, If I actually didn't chat or talk to anyone, the rest between the sets and so forth, my workouts probably would last maybe an hour, hour and 15 minutes at tops. But once you add in all the chatting and this and that, they can go an hour and a half, 2 hours, that type of thing. But generally, a good solid hour of working out with your earphones in where you're not being disturbed, should be a sufficient enough time to, with your rest periods and pauses and stuff. In my opinion, I think would be, a sufficient enough time to get a good workout in.
So an hour, 45 minutes, I agree with that entirely. You know, you have to look at it like this too, though. If it is taking you 2 or 3 hours to get through a workout, and you try to drop down to like 2 hours, or it's taking you an hour and a half and you try to drop down to an hour, that's going to increase the density of your training, and that's essentially it's increasing another variable, just like adding more weight or adding more sets. So just like we'd suggest to add calories and add carbohydrates slower when you begin and when you make changes, if you're doing it over the course of a longer period of time, you're going to want to gradually adjust to that, and that'll make you stronger and improve your body composition, and you'll see more gains that way too. So it's a good way to actually increase the intensity of your training. But she says her heart rate goes up a lot. Sometimes I performed with intervals 15 rest and 50 of max work for 28 to 30 minutes, always weighted in some calisthenics like pull-ups, chin-ups, circuit training with reps, 10 to 15 squats, deadlifts. I finished my routines with 10 to 12 minutes of moderate jump rope. My macros are supposed to be 100 protein, 55 fat, 270 carbs. Sometimes I overdo them. I like to eat a lot. Or should I stay where I am right now? Well, I'm going to say I wish I had read the rest of your question before I went on that little ramble there. I'd say that you're getting your workouts done. If you're doing interval training, that's really good. You seem to be very well conditioned, and I'm going to go ahead and say that yeah, like where your macros are right now, I don't think that they're bad. Depending upon your body weight, I assume that you're fairly light if you're doing 100 grams of protein and 55 grams of fat.
Yeah, I think she was actually under 100 pounds.
All right, then that's
small thing.
Fine.
Yeah, she's a small thing, but she's done awesome. She's not afraid to eat, and she's made great progress.
The only thing I would suggest or present as a caveat is that if you want to get bigger and you want to increase your muscle mass, then as a natural consequence, you are going to need to eat more. So I'm not sure where it would come from, because your carbs are actually pretty good there. I might even suggest that you, and this is very rare for me, because I don't typically think people need as much protein as they eat, but if you're eating 100 grams of protein right now, 55 grams of fat, 270 carbs, I might even suggest that you bump your protein and fat up a little bit and see how that affects. Goodbye, Ian. That's my brother leaving. Bye. That's my sister leaving. They're going somewhere. Bye, guys. Pizza. They're gonna eat pizza. I'll eat some pizza too. But what do you think, April? I'd suggest you go for maybe 125 grams of protein and bump her fat up maybe 10 grams and hit 65 and keep the carbs right where they are.
Yeah, I agree. I think the increase in protein would be good for her. I've told her in the forum, because she said that she's been hungry, and she goes over her recommended macros, from time to time, and I told her, it's completely okay. Listen to your body. If you're hungry, obviously, and she's actually posted a lot of progress pictures and stuff in the forum. She looks great. She's growing. Her abs are popping through. She looks great. So obviously it's working, and obviously by her listening to her body and going over a little bit on the calories on the days that she has, it's paid off. So she's had no negative effects from doing that.
Well, then, I think if we're on the same page, hopefully Alejandra, you'll be on the same page with us and increase your protein and fat a little bit and see how that works out, and get back to us on it in the forum, and we'll see what happens. Cassandra got back to us. I've got some more questions in here. Might not get to all of them. I'm going to try and go a little fast through this so we can, because I want to answer questions. I love doing this, but if you're cool, April, if you can give me another like 5 minutes.
That's fine, of course.
All right, thank you, April. Cassandra says she's at 225 carbs, 160 grams of protein, 75 grams of fat on workout days. She drops down to 100 carbs on rest days. Just tested at 27% body fat before ATP. She started gaining weight last couple months. Doesn't think that she was in much of a deficit, but she guesses she was. Now she's eating more carbs. She realizes she wasn't eating that many before, and she jumped into the carbs instead of working her way up. She says, oops, and that may be what's going on in the first place. You may have just gone into things a little bit too quickly. Did you take any notes on Cassandra?
I did.
Awesome. With that added information, what do you think?
I absolutely think that she probably just jumped in too quickly and her body's still adjusting. She had only been eating to perform for 4 weeks, and then we had, inquired as to what her diet was like prior to, if she had jumped in, that type of thing. I think she absolutely, probably is just still adjusting to the higher carb intake. She will level off at this point. Honestly, if she's been doing it, if she jumped in and she, has been doing that for 4 weeks, I personally, I wouldn't back out now. I wouldn't lower it back down at this point. I would just stay where you are. If anything, I'm not sure how many rest days she has a week. If her primary goal is fat loss, I would recommend, at least 2 to 3 rest days if that's your primary goal. I see a lot of times in the forum, a lot of people, all they want to do is lose body fat, but yet, they don't want to stop working out. They want to train 5-6 days a week, and it only gives them 1 day to to reduce the calories and, and to try to create a deficit. And, in the long term, that's not going to give you the progress that you want as quick as you want it, because you're constantly having to eat the nutrients to recover from all of the stress and the training and the activity and that type of thing.
Yeah, so essentially, you want to take rest days, but that they don't have to be rest days where you lay there in a coma on a couch and have someone feed you whatever you're going to eat. It does benefit you to get up and do low intensity activity it's going to utilize fat more as an energy source, because if you're exercising, if you're doing CrossFit especially, or anything that's highly engaging, that's high intensity, you're going to be burning through carbohydrates. You're going to be asking your body to adapt to using carbohydrates more, and if they're not there, then you're going to have, it's going to be negative. So rest days, but don't sit there. Get up, go on a walk, play, jump around, dance. Just don't do anything that's too strenuous. And I think you'll see good results with that. We have a question from Lorenzo Pignon. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. He says, here's a question from last week. Was able to finish up. Here goes. I'm a triathlete. I follow CrossFit Endurance with CrossFit as my strength program. My typical week is as follows. My question is about calories and macros. Yeah, I remember from last week.
I have it written down.
April, you kick ass.
I have it written down. He's like 175 pounds.
Uh-huh.
And I think he said he had been following 150 grams of carbs and 125 grams of fat, I think, or that's what he had calculated.
Yes.
And then I don't think he came back.
Oh, yeah. He says yes, 175 pounds. He tries to get in a gram of protein per pound of body weight, 125 to 150 carbs, 75 to 100 grams of fat. And he doesn't want to count calories, and he tries to stick to whole foods. So, yeah, you're doing a lot of work, but you're totally not eating enough, in my opinion. So, and I'm sure April agrees with me. I think your first line of action, if you want to eat mostly whole foods, is to add a carbohydrate source, add a starchy carbohydrate source to every meal that you eat. Initially, though, I don't want to see you going and adding like a sweet potato in the morning, or that's the second question. Am I under eating, and about how much? I'd estimate you're going to need to increase your calories by like, what does that come down to?
I would say he probably needs to increase his calories, depending upon how many days he's a triathlete and he's following CrossFit Endurance. I would say he probably needs to increase his calories by close to 1,000. Now, what I would recommend, I would actually recommend something a little bit different from what you were recommending, James. I know he doesn't want to count calories, and I know he doesn't want to, deal with the hassle and the headache, and I totally understand. But I would actually recommend him figuring out exactly how much he needs to eat and then tracking those calories so he can see and feel what that amount of food looks like and eat that for, a couple of weeks and see what it looks like, and then he should be able to intuitively eat, a sufficient amount on his own after that. But I see so many times, people that want to intuitively eat, and they want to eat, half a cup of rice, and that's cooked rice, which is what, like an eighth of a cup of dry rice, half a cup of cooked rice, which is about 20 grams of carbs, and then say, well, I've been eating carbs around my workouts, why are my workouts not getting better? Because you're not eating enough. And I think a lot of times it's hard to go back and try to troubleshoot and fix issues when you have no data to look at too as well.
All right, so April's going to be tough on you, and she's going to suggest that you do count calories and track, even if you don't want to.
Just for
I'm going to agree.
A small period of time.
For like a week. This is typically, like, if you were to come to me as a personal client, Lorenzo, I would probably have taken the same route there. I'd suggest you track your food for a week. He does 2-a-days. When should his carb source come in? Initially, well, I'm going to suggest that every meal has a carbohydrate in it in the end. Initially, you're going to want to do that in the meal before whatever training session. So ideally, that would be in the morning, and then post-workout, and then post-workout again, or pre-workout again. Essentially within a 1 or 2 hour window before and after every workout. And thus the issue here, though, if you're just adding in the carbs and it's not enough or it's too much, you're not really going to know what's going on unless you are tracking. You're not going to know, well, maybe you didn't need to get up an extra hour early and eat, or maybe you can just eat before you go to bed, maybe post-workout because your sessions in the evening end up being more demanding upon you. Maybe you need to eat more, and like April said, maybe a portion of rice isn't going to cut it, and you need to go and eat twice that. So tracking is going to give you actual data and numbers so that you can kind of understand what's going on rather than kind of winging it.
It's kind of a humorous story. I went and did a nutrition seminar at a local CrossFit gym here, and I was talking to some of the females and some of the males, and this one guy, he worked out 3 times a day, and he told me that he doesn't want to eat anything processed, anything, which I completely agree and understand, if that's his opinion. And he told me that he eats enough, and I said, well, how much do you eat? He says, well, I don't count calories. I said, well, tell me what a typical day looks like for you. And I've tracked calories and macros for so long that, I know how much, carbs and calories are in a banana. But literally going through, everything that he said that he ate in a typical day, it was under 2,000 calories. And he said he ate a lot, and I think a lot of times if you track for a short period of time, it's an eye-opener as to, how much you had been eating, why you, can't put 50 pounds on your back squat, or, you find out what the solutions are to the problem all along, just by doing that.
Yeah, and I think that, and this will be the last question of the webinar. I'm going to thank everybody, especially April, for staying on for an extra 13 minutes now. Oh my. But consider this, that if you wanted to develop explosive strength in your back squat, for instance, and you were to have someone suggest to you, like Louis Simmons or any other coach, that you put on 50% of your 1 rep max and do that for 10 sets of 3 as fast as you can. So down and up as fast as you can, ballistically. Bam, bam, boom, 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 boom. And you didn't track how much weight you used, and you could never measure how fast you were with a specific weight. That's kind of like shooting in the dark. So if you're not tracking your calories, you're kind of doing the same thing. You're giving yourself these variables of macros, protein, fat, and carbohydrates, you're giving yourself the training volume, the training intensity, the training density, duration, all of those things, and you're unable to control one variable so that you can get the desired result. So, you know, I guess if you don't want to track, if you can just take a week to do it, you would be surprised that you'd be surprised how many people have said that they eat a lot and they're not actually eating anything. Just like someone could say, oh yeah, I squat a lot of weight or I'm very fast, but they're actually running a 15-minute mile and not even squatting their body weight. It's you know, you're leaving it up to perspective and subjective analysis of the situation rather than using objective measurements like calories in, the amount of protein and fat that you're eating, and all that sort. So, you have anything to add, April, before we shut
No,
everything down?
I was just going to say, you know, and tracking is not a lifelong thing. You know, once you get the feel for it and the eye for what it is, you know, there is no need to, you know, you don't need to track anymore. Once you find that sweet spot, you know, and you're fine. Just like me, you know, I know exactly down to the grams of everything that I need to eat with different variations of different carbs and protein and stuff to hit exactly what I want. But I still track only because it literally takes me, you know, 45 seconds to add my food in, and plus I've got like a 230-day logging streak on my FitnessPal that I get so many likes from that, you know, at this point I just couldn't lose that streak, because once you miss one day, you can't go back. It starts all over again. But, you know, so it's just kind of just for the streak right now, but I really don't need to log. You know, there's some days that I may log my breakfast today and continue to eat, and then tomorrow I will go back and log my lunch, dinner, pre-workout, you know, whatever from the day before, you know, just to fill it in, you know, type thing. So it's not a lifelong thing, and, you know, I don't think that he, you know, it's not something that he would need to, you know, to feel overwhelmed at the thought of tracking and how time consuming, you know, that it is, because it's really not.
Yeah, it's just another behavior you have to adopt, and if it works out for you and it helps, then you can keep doing it. I never used to track my workouts, and I used to track my calories every single day. I wouldn't miss a day, but I don't track anymore, and I found the same thing that we're both experiencing, is that my calories are just too low. So I start tracking again for a couple days, and I realize, oh, well, all I had to do was eat another 3 bananas, or eat a larger chicken breast, or eat a little bit more rice, or, you know, they're easy little modifications, and once you know what you need to do, you don't need to keep tracking. You know that you need extra food, and you just eyeball it and add it in, and then if you check in a couple months later, it can be like that, or it can be micromanagement down to the very T, where you know exactly how long you train, exactly the weight of every little morsel of food that goes into your mouth. It's just going to depend upon how it fits into your lifestyle, and if it doesn't fit, you don't have to do it, but it'll be a great thing for you to do initially. And I think that's all the questions we have. I think that's all the webinar we've got for right now. I want to thank everybody for asking questions. You're welcome, Lorenzo, and everybody for the thanks that I haven't gone and addressed yet. You're welcome. I love doing these. April enjoys doing them. This is kind of our life and our commitment and our passion is helping people figure out what to eat so that they can be jacked and tan.
That's right.
So I'm going to say good night, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.